Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, April 10th through Sunday, April 16th, 2023. This week we continue to experience this pretty massive lineup in Taurus and Aries. So that would be Venus, Uranus, Mercury, North Node, Jupiter, Sun, and Chiron all lined up between about halfway through Aries to the end of Taurus. This will be starting to break up this week though as Venus enters Gemini. So that also indicates a shift in our appreciation for beauty and pleasure, rather than valuing things that are more solid in nature and more physical. The focus becomes more intellectual and more variable. We're wanting variety more so. We're wanting compelling conversations, and we're more attracted to ideas and things of that matter, things that have to do with the mind. Also this week we are continuing to experience Mercury in the pre-shadow. I'm not going to go super in depth about that since I talked about that in the last forecast, but basically everything is just happening very quickly right now in preparation for Mercury retrograde, which will happen later this month. Other than that too, I wanted to mention Pluto is still at 0 degrees Aquarius. So the combination of Pluto at the first degree of Aquarius with all these planets in Aries and Taurus continues to point to this being a huge new beginning of sorts. And this is only going to intensify because next week, we have a lot going down. We're entering eclipse season as well as Mercury retrograde next week. So this week, I'm wondering what I'm going to title this video because it's almost like the calm before the storm. But I know that's a little bit cliche, but really things actually haven't been that calm though. They've been pretty eventful. Everything's happening very quickly. We are being thrown into uncharted territory, but I'm telling you, it's only going to get more intense. There's going to be only more things happening. Okay, let's check in with what the moon is doing this week. So moon will be transiting from Sagittarius through Pisces this week. This is generally a pretty rough neighborhood for the moon to be in. It doesn't really thrive in Sagittarius, Capricorn, or Aquarius. So, that does point to, at least on an emotional level, us being a little bit unsettled. Nothing too intense, although there is a third quarter moon at 23 degrees Capricorn this week. So that will point to definitely a very active day or maybe very eventful day, not in the sense that it would be life-changing for most people, but it would kind of rile us up, I think, particularly because, we are getting closer to the eclipse season. So I always say, when it's eclipse season or when it's close to eclipse season like this, it's not just the new moons and the full moons that are eclipses, or in other words, it's not just the new moons and the full moons that I think we need to pay attention to. Every part of the lunar phase is intensified during eclipse season. So pay special attention to that third quarter moon this week for sure. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, let's get into the day-by-day forecast here. So starting out Monday, April 10th, moon is cruising through Sagittarius. I really like this dynamic because today moon will trine the sun. This is a waning trine, so that means the moon is losing light. It's a waning gibbous moon, I believe, right now. So really beautiful. Moon trining the sun gives us our best shot at everyone being in a collective, pretty good mood. This is a very harmonious dynamic, and with this particular dynamic, both the sun and the moon are in fire signs. So that means that the energies are supporting us in being very outgoing, very kind of exuberant and spontaneous. I think this is especially true because Sun is very close to the conjunction with Jupiter at this point, and so moon will be trining not only the sun but also Jupiter. So that brings in a lot of this, expansive energy, lots of benefic energy, supporting us in just, doing what we want to in the moment, I guess, and celebrating ourselves, being very proud, being very outspoken. If you have a lot of fire signs in your chart, you will feel this. Well, you probably feel this all the time, but especially starting out the week here. But for the rest of us as well, we can all embrace this more fiery side, I guess you could say. So really good start to the week. One last thing about that too, it's really kind of perfect for a Monday because it's definitely a lot of energy supporting initiation for sure. Okay, going to Tuesday, April 11th. Moon continues through Sagittarius, and in the latter half of the day, Eastern Standard Time, Moon will enter Capricorn. So that's, of course, a huge shift in the mood. I think the transition from Sagittarius to Capricorn, especially for the Moon, is one of the most jarring sign transitions or ingressions, I would say, because Sagittarius is such an optimistic, carefree energy, and then moving to Capricorn, it very much shuts down the party. I think we are pushed to being more responsible. Let's focus on the long term rather than how we feel in the moment, and that can be challenging, especially for some of us, depending on our astrology. But this also intensifies things because Moon is in detriment, and Moon is now stepping into, at least by sign, it's stepping into more of a square aspect with the Sun rather than a trine. So, the emotional state is very much debilitated right now, not only because Moon is in Capricorn where it's in detriment, but also it's beginning to come into orb of a square with the Sun, and Sun is exalted right now in Aries. So it's almost like the Sun and the Moon are beginning to, things are becoming tense between them. They're about to have a fight, I guess you could say, a very tense connection where they see each other, they're connecting, but they are at odds with one another. And here, this fight, so to speak, is really not balanced at all. Sun is in Aries, so it's very strong, very powerful. It very much dominates the feminine energy in this standpoint. So, increasingly as we get into this week here, the more you go with, how you feel in the moment and allowing yourself to be more vulnerable or more sensitive, these things can be good, but in this dynamic, it's really not supported. This dynamic is really showing that the masculine energy is dominant. So being more physical in nature or more literal, more direct, but also focusing on the future, being ambitious, putting your immediate feelings aside. Of course, use your own discernment, but that's generally what the chart is showing as we get closer to this third quarter moon. Also for Tuesday, Venus will enter Gemini. So again, huge shift in our desire, our pleasure seeking, what we find pleasurable. In Taurus, it's very straightforward. In Gemini, things become much more variable, much more diverse. We're wanting eclectic experiences. We're wanting meaningful conversations. We're wanting to indulge in experiences that are intellectual in nature. Okay. Also, for those of you who have Gemini placements, this is, a really beautiful transit. Whenever Venus is in your sign, it's almost like things come to you more easily. Others enjoy your company more, even when you feel like you're not really doing anything different. So, it makes you more attractive, and it makes you more easily find what you are attracted to as well. So those of you Geminis out there, you can enjoy this transit for the next few weeks. Okay, and then I should mention too, right as soon as Venus enters Gemini, it will, of course, trine Pluto. So Venus at 0 degrees Gemini, trining Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius. I keep saying this is interesting whenever a planet enters a sign and makes this, aspect with Pluto, because it brings the focus to this new beginning, this, shift into a new era of sorts. What does this mean? That we're in a new phase, we're in a new, very long cycle, a new world, so to speak. These aspects will help kind of illustrate what this new world is all about. Venus here making this trine, this is showing a more glamorous side of this new era. Venus in Gemini shows that our desires, our interests, what we're attracted to, these things are aligned with what this new world is beginning to be about, at least for the current moment. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're desiring information and intellectual experiences. Pluto in Aquarius is all about that. It's showing that the whole focus of this era of the long term is becoming much more radical or experimental, very, brainy energy, very quirky. Venus and Gemini, it's much shorter transit, of course, but it is aligning with many of those same ideals. So in other words, our current desires are, at least for the moment, aligned with much longer term initiations that are currently happening. One last thing for Tuesday, Sun will conjoin Jupiter at 21 degrees Aries. I think you can view conjunctions like this one of two ways. One way would be to say, Sun and Jupiter, these are both benefics. They're both pretty strong in Aries, particularly the Sun, but I would say Jupiter as well. And so having both of them conjunct like this just makes them, ultra powerful, super fiery, super expansive, and aiding us in those types of things. Another way of interpreting this would be to say that with this conjunction, the Sun is actually blocking out Jupiter. This kind of happens with any conjunction with the Sun. But, particularly this conjunction, Jupiter is actually as far away from us as it can really get, generally speaking. It's completely on the other side of the Sun from Earth, if you think about it. So it's almost like the Sun is becoming, between us and Jupiter, between us and the abundance. And another way of looking at it that's still kind of part of this second interpretation, though, is it's almost like the Sun burns out whatever planet it's conjunct. You can't see it anymore. It's obscured from your view. Really, any planet within like multiple signs from the Sun we can't see because it will be in the sky during the daytime, generally speaking. But especially when a planet's exactly conjunct the Sun, it will be not visible at any time of day or night. So okay. So with Jupiter represents abundance, and mostly abundance, and expansion. So it's almost like those things are becoming burnt out. They can become too intensified, too much of a good thing, maybe. I think that's the main takeaway here. Jupiter conjunct Sun in Aries. They are supporting initiation and expansion in a very intense and rapid way, but maybe too much so. I'm just going to let you kind of ponder on that a little bit. But, those of you with Aries placements, especially close to 21 degrees Aries, will especially feel this. So I would say, take everything in moderation. Use moderation with everything. Maybe slow down or take breaks if you can, because you may experience burnout. It's almost like there's too much, electricity in our bodies when we have aspects like this. Okay, Wednesday, April 12th, moon continues through Capricorn. We're still not going to have that exact third quarter moon aspect. In other words, we're still not going to have that square between the moon and the Sun today. But, I always say, like, we're basically in the midst of it, though. You're definitely going to be experiencing that tension, that restlessness that we get with every quarter moon, but especially this one, too. I would think that, the square between Aries and Capricorn is a particularly intense one because these are such strong-willed energies. They're both energies that have to do with initiation and ambition, goal setting, working towards something, working toward the future. They both have a lot in common in these regards, but the way they go about these things is so different. Aries is so fast and immediate. Capricorn is so slow and focused on the long term. And so when you combine both of them, they do have a lot in common, but not in any ways that make them easy to blend. They really completely butt heads. Neither of these energies mixes well with others, so to speak. So we'll already be experiencing many of the themes of this third quarter moon, even, definitely into Wednesday for sure. So what I always say, you probably know my spiel with quarter moons. They can cause restlessness or anxiety. They can cause us to be irritable. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Quarter moons are great for initiation and action. This is a third quarter moon, so to keep in mind, third quarter moons often have to do with physical action or, physically making a move or initiating in some kind of way. But third quarter moons are also very philosophical in nature. They tend to represent a crisis in consciousness. Again, I would kind of, highlight that the moon is debilitated right now. The feminine energy, the emotional energy, our emotional kind of consciousness collectively is in peril right now. You could say it's disadvantaged. It's almost like we've lost connection of how we feel in the moment, or if we do, if we are aware of how we feel in the moment, it's in a place where there's really nothing to do about it. We just can't honor how we feel in the moment, because the situation isn't aligned with that, if that makes sense. And this is a tough lesson, but it's something we have to do. It's something that people with strong Capricorn energy know, in their hearts, that, sometimes you have to put aside your immediate feelings in order to do what's right, or do what will give you a happier tomorrow, so to speak. So definitely some kind of tough stuff going on, but this could be really great for initiation, definitely great for goal setting, or working on ambitions, working on what you want in the future. Where do you see yourself in a month from now or years from now? Work toward that right now, I guess. I wanted to mention too, so besides all of that, Moon will be also opposing Mars today, especially in the morning Eastern Standard Time. So this just adds to all of this as well. Mars is in Cancer, so it's showing that we can be a little bit temperamental right now, a little bit sensitive, especially with those that are close to us, like close friends or family. We can be a little bit sensitive with right now. So this kind of just exacerbates everything. Moon opposing Mars, so that there's potentially some kind of irritability in the morning Eastern Standard Time. Some kind of frustration there is definitely likely. Okay, going forward to Thursday, April 13th. Okay, so now in the morning Eastern Standard Time, looks like very early morning. So depending on your time zone, the third quarter moon could happen on late on Wednesday. But Eastern Standard Time, that third quarter moon does happen in the early morning hours. And it's happening at 23 degrees Capricorn. So moon at 23 degrees Capricorn, squaring sun at 23 degrees Aries. And at this point, I've sort of already illustrated many of the themes of this third quarter moon, because like I said, we really will start to experience this on Tuesday when moon enters Capricorn, and we're definitely in the midst of it throughout Wednesday for sure. But this continues Thursday, and it reaches its peak, so to speak, early on Thursday, Eastern Standard Time. So again, lots of restless energy, feeling irritable, feeling either detached from our emotions, or having uncomfortable emotions, not being able to honor our emotions in the current state, having to work towards some kind of goal. This is a great time for goal setting, taking action, making a move, things of that nature. And again, third quarter moons are very philosophical. They're very psychological, very mentally oriented. So this could have to do with making a physical kind of move or change, but it could also be a lot about changing your mindset. In general, this does look very psychological, very emotional in nature. So maybe it's just about resetting your perception on things. How can you go about what will ultimately make you the most happy in the long run? That's what this is all about, really. I would say on a more general level too for this day, it's one of those days where there can be a lot of accents or just a lot of activity in general. In its most mundane form, I think that's how we can experience some of these astrological transits, just as it being a crazy day. I think that would be the simplest way to look at it. Okay, Friday, April 14th. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say late on Thursday, moon does enter Aquarius as well. So again, that shifts the dynamic, and it is kind of nice when we get an immediate shift. Right after an event like a third quarter moon, the moon enters a new sign, so we kind of have this really intense ramping up and then cooling off kind of dramatically, pretty soon after. Okay, but for Friday, April 14th, moon transits through Aquarius, which it recently, just entered. So again, this is a much more detached energy. This is still Saturnian territory, I look at it. So, moon is still, it's not debilitated, it's not in detriment, but it's still in a sign which is having to do with the future, so it still involves themes of not embracing our immediate feelings in order to focus on much more holistic or long-term endeavors, I guess you could say. So some of that still continues, some of that emotional detachment still continues. But, again, moon is now changing its relationship with the sun. Moon is in Aquarius, which is yang, it's air, so it blends much more readily with sun and Aries. Also, both of these are much more, they have a kind of radical or rebellious experimental side to their nature. Both sun and Aries as well as moon in Aquarius. So this is definitely an easier dynamic, something more easygoing, I guess you could say. We've kind of calmed down from that intensity of the last few days. Okay, and then today we will get an aspect, so that would be Venus at 4 degrees Gemini squaring Saturn at 4 degrees Pisces. I always say, it's kind of a mess, generally speaking, when you get squares between Gemini and Pisces, because both are so adaptable, so eclectic. There's so much going on just within each sign. So when you mix both of them together, it's, there's just so much going on. It's almost impossible to figure it all out. And maybe it is impossible. But in this case, Venus is squaring Saturn. So this is showing that what we're wanting in the moment is not aligned with maybe what we really need to do, especially in regard to the long term or group obligations in general, but especially obligations to our community, our family, our work, things of that nature, or other organizations we may belong to, or even just for ourselves. There's a disconnect between immediate satisfaction and the long term. So it seems like that's the whole theme of this week, is all about balancing our immediate feelings versus the long term satisfaction, I guess you could say. We're wanting in the moment things that are intellectual, witty banter. We're wanting to learn, but Saturn in Pisces is showing that, maybe there's something much deeper that we must also pay attention to, like spirituality and things of that nature. Paying attention to what we feel, like wisdom rather than just knowledge. So there's kind of a push and pull there, I guess you could say. Okay, Saturday, April 15th. Moon, you can see here, noon Eastern Standard Time, moon will be at 25 degrees Aquarius, so it makes a waning sextile to sun at 25 degrees Aries. This is a waning crescent moon, very beautiful to look at, and definitely beautiful in its themes astrologically as well. There's generally a good mood collectively when moon is sextiling the sun. This is peak of that, harmonious dynamic that Aquarius makes with Aries in general. Both of these are wild energies. They are eccentric. They are individualistic, especially when combined with one another. Aquarius does have a side to it that's a little bit different, but I don't think that's really highlighted right now. There is that more conservative side to it, but in this context, with moon sextiling the sun, these are both individualistic energies, experimental energies. So, if you wanted to explore that more wild, just, living your truth, speaking your truth, acting in the moment, being a little bit, very direct and speaking spontaneously or impulsively off the cuff, that's what these energies are supporting for sure. And then in the latter half of the day, moon will exit Aquarius and enter Pisces. And so, I think this is where the moon kind of gets a breath of fresh air, or I'm more picturing it as like a drink of water that it so craves, because it's really just out of place in Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. So I really view Pisces as the first sign that moon, the moon's themes blend very readily with. Moon is our emotional state, represents intuition and emotion, intuition, spirituality, things that are nuanced in nature. And so in Pisces, what better sign than Pisces for the moon? I guess you could say Cancer or Taurus technically, but Pisces I think is a really great sign for the moon to be in. It supports us being a little bit more, emotionally vulnerable, more connected to, being receptive, being intuitive, things of that nature. So that's exactly what the moon is all about. I also think this is beautiful. It's kind of a beautiful dynamic with Sun in Aries where it's at home. Moon is in Pisces where I know technically it's not at home, but it's almost tempting for me to say Moon is at home in Pisces. I would really go, almost that far. One last thing about that though, we are winding down. This is the last part of the lunar phase basically. So we are beginning to get into a dark moon where things can be literally dark in nature, but they can also be more spiritual or non-physical in nature, more oriented toward resting. And keep in mind, there's still a lot of things pointing toward initiation, beginnings, intensity. But as far as the lunar cycle goes, we're starting to enter a more inactive phase, relatively speaking. This may be a little bit intense too because we are close to eclipse season. We're not in eclipse season yet, but things will be gradually intensifying. Okay, Sunday, April 16th, moon continues through Pisces. Again, this is really beautiful, supporting us in being intuitive, creative, artistic, emotional, knowing how we feel, things of that nature. So that's really excellent. And Sun is still in Aries where it's exalted. So strong masculine energy, strong emotional energy. Things are a little bit balanced between them, unlike how it was, for much of this week, I guess you could say. Very early in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, really, at night still, basically, like after midnight, moon crosses over Saturn. So again, this points to us, like getting real, being realistic. Let's be realistic with how we feel, with how we fit in the cosmos. Let's get realistic with spirituality and our approach to it, things of that nature. So this could be still applying, really late Saturday as well as much of Sunday as well. But this will be kind of fleeting since it is a lunar aspect and the moon travels so quickly. Okay, but that's pretty much what I have for you for this week. So it's kind of a weird week because on the one hand, there's not much going on in comparison to what we're about to experience. But on the other hand, there's still a lot going on. I wouldn't say it's a boring week by any means for sure. But it's almost like there are these side stories or, like, because it's not even like what's happening this week is going to ramp up directly to what's happening next week. It's almost like there's things that seem completely irrelevant or distinct that are happening this week compared to what's happening next week. So that's what's kind of interesting or unusual about it, I think. Okay, well, let's talk about next week a little bit here. So there's a lot of stuff happening, when it rains, it pours. So Sun, first we're going to get a new moon solar eclipse at 29 degrees Aries. This is kind of a blue moon, I guess you could say, because I guess that would apply to full moons, not new moons. So I take that back. But new moon solar eclipse, 29 degrees Aries, very intense. We're going to unpack that next week. And immediately after the new moon solar eclipse, Sun will enter Taurus, so shifting the whole, astrological season, I guess you could say. And as soon as the Sun does that, you know what aspect it will make. Sun will square Pluto. So that's pretty interesting. I don't usually talk about aspects in these little closing segments, but that's a big one though. That's gonna be really big. And then literally one day after all that happens in one day, by the way. The next day Mercury will turn retrograde. I'm not even making this up. So lots and lots to unpack. Next week's gonna be a very interesting week for sure. And really it's gonna signal the start of not just an interesting week, but an interesting phase. We're entering eclipse season next week. So take care of yourselves. I hope you are all well, and I look forward to talking to you next week.